This is Dr. Paul Thomlinson from Compass Health Network, and this is our podcast aimed at inspiring hope and promoting wellness. Here we try to offer listeners a better understanding of some of the challenges of these times we're living in and living through. An understanding built on insights from research in the social, behavioral, and health sciences, as well as from stories of lived experience. The bottom line is, we need to find and apply the best evidence and wisdom we have so that we can know, do, and be better and better. I don't think it'll surprise anyone when I say that we seem to be living in times of great incivility. By the way, let's talk about that word for a second, incivility. It's used to describe people acting against humanity and empathy by harming others through their actions, their words, or, say, certain hand gestures. The word comes from the Latin incivilis, which means not a citizen. Literally, not a citizen. We are not being citizens when we behave without humanity toward another person. But I digress, which I often do. So, back to this being a time of incivility. I mean, just look around in any restaurant, airplane, retail store, street corner, music venue, or especially any social media platform, and you'll see it on full display, which makes this an excellent time to remind folks that being civil to others makes the world a whole lot better. So this episode is in recognition and honor of National Civility Month, which is observed each August to help the world remember to treat others the way we want to be treated ourselves, with kindness, empathy, and respect, with humanity. Did you know that restaurant workers quit in record numbers in the past couple of years? Well, they did, and one of the key drivers of that quit rate is the working conditions, in particular, the incredible spike in incivility by, well, you and me. Customers who treat them with sometimes astonishing rudeness. I have a friend who spent several years serving folks at a drive-through window. She says she'll never ever do a job like that again because of the incredible regularity of customers storming into the restaurant to complain loudly and rudely about getting the wrong amount of cream or sugar in their coffee. You know, matters of earth-shattering importance. And just the feeling that they're being constantly yelled at their entire shift. That's more than anyone should ever be asked to endure for any amount of money. Let's talk more about civility in the workplace in particular. And remember, these principles are really applicable to all spheres of life. I mean, it's not really a place where being more kind, empathic, and humane is inappropriate, is there? There's a researcher named Dr. Christine Parath who teaches management at Georgetown University. She spent most of her career studying civility and civility in the workplace in particular. She says, being truly civil means doing the small things, like smiling and saying hello to someone in the hallway or listening fully when someone's speaking to you. She also says it doesn't mean you can't have strong opinions, you can't disagree, you can't have conflict, or can't give negative feedback. It's just do it civilly. Incivility, though, is disrespect and rudeness. And it includes a lot of different behaviors, from mocking or belittling someone to excluding them, to texting while someone's talking to you during meetings or telling offensive jokes. And she also points out, and her research focuses on the cost of incivility, and it's high. Instead of focusing on work, those who experience that behavior are far less motivated, worried about future incidents of incivility and stress that comes from it. Some, like the restaurant workers I mentioned, even leave their jobs because of it. What's unfortunate is that employers are often not aware of these behaviors because employees don't report it. If you think about it for a minute, it makes perfect sense that negative and uncivil behavior is estimated to cost millions of dollars in lost productivity and other costs, turnover costs, for example, in American companies. And it's not just those who are on the receiving end of incivility that are impacted. It has a major ripple effect that Dr. Parath has documented, actually. Employees who witness incivility in the workplace are affected too. They become 3 times less likely to help anyone if they're working around incivility. Now think about that. In healthcare especially, for example, not working together or being 3 times less likely to help someone can have dire consequences for our mission in healthcare, and dire consequences, unfortunately, for patients. We have to work together. Well, Parath puts it this way: incivility is contagious. It's a bug, it's a virus, and we can catch it anywhere, not only at work, but at home, online, or in our community. It affects our emotions, motivations, performance, and how we treat others. So when I think about my own history of speaking or behaving less than civilly, shall we say, I'm keenly aware that it usually happened when I was under great stress, and I wasn't handling it very well. And I think most people will cop to being uncivil because they're stressed. But another reason often cited is that some leaders fear they'll appear less leader-like if they act civilly. Do nice guys really finish last? Do you have to be a jerk to get ahead? Porath's research shows that thankfully that's not the case. In fact, she notes, if you're civil, you're more likely to be seen as a leader and you tend to perform better. Now, some managers, leaders, or supervisors act uncivilly and are unaware that they're doing it. Porath describes the case of one experienced doctor who admitted being rude because, well, his mentor acted disrespectfully and was rude toward him. He didn't think there was another way. Sometimes we behave, of course, as we were taught. The power of legacy systems, even of incivility and rudeness. It's time to think again about such behavior and attitudes, no matter what our position, at what level in the organizational chart. And the good news is, if we find ourselves being uncivil, it's possible to change. We can get better and better. How do we become more civil, especially in the workplace? Well, simple things like saying thank you, sharing credit, there's a big one, listening attentively to people, humbly asking questions, acknowledging people, even smiling, have such a great effect on others, and in turn, lift yourself up as well. Is what we might think of as a virtuous cycle instead of a vicious one. But what causes incivility? There are lots of reasons for it, but there are 4 root causes that deserve some attention, I think. And remember, knowing the cause does not double as a cure, but it sure is important in helping us find one. So first root of incivility is lack of self-restraint. Incivility in any context can be avoided, or at least controlled, if we actively practice self-restraint. Now that's sometimes very difficult and is very much tied to our own emotional intelligence level, the ability to use our frontal lobes to put the brakes on our impulses to say or do something uncivil in response to being provoked, for example. Second thing is anonymity. There's a lot of research on this one. Studies have shown that people have less inhibition when they know that they can't be held or made accountable for their actions. Remember I mentioned social media as a hotbed of incivility? Wonder why that is. Well, often the anonymity of keyboard warriors or the physical distance from those with whom we are interacting can lead us to say things more aggressively or less kindly than we ever would face to face. You know it's true. The third root, stress, I mentioned. A considerable amount of incivility in the workplace can be traced to both personal and work-related stress. It's certainly true for me, and I bet it is for you too. Displaced aggression is as common a psychological phenomenon as there is. The key is to cultivate healthier stress management strategies and put it in its proper place, stress that is. And the fourth one I wanted to mention, the root cause of incivility, is individualism and the freedom of expression. I mean, we have a First Amendment right to say whatever the heck we want to, right? It's embedded in the Constitution. We're Americans. We can say whatever we want. Well, some seem to hold the value that expressing yourself in the most authentic way possible, whether civil or not, is a right and an entitlement. But I like to think of it the way Dr. Adam Grant put it recently. He wrote, "I'm just being honest is a poor excuse for being rude. Candor is being forthcoming in what you say. Respect is being considerate in how you say it. Now, being direct doesn't prevent you from being thoughtful about the best way to deliver it." Let me close with the truth that civility costs you nothing and buys you everything. So in preparation for this episode, I posted a request of my Facebook friends to share an example of how being treated in a civil way made things better, or some of their own tips for civility, if you will. I got several responses I thought worth sharing for obvious reasons, because they're the lived experience of civility and its power to make life better, to make us better. I want to share a few. First, my sweet friend Charlene Christensen Sutherland shared the following. "When I broke my arm, I had a few friends that were there for me, going shopping for me, taking me to my appointments. I have some friends walk me out to my car and help me put my walker in my car. I try to be very independent, but any kind of help is always appreciated, even if it's just a hug and good conversation, especially for people who spend a large amount of time by themselves." Notice the appreciation from Charlene for these small acts of humanity, of civility, that add up to a whole lot of inclusion and belonging. There's no better way to inspire hope and promote wellness than that. Then there's my friend and bandmate, the guitarist and a human extraordinaire, Eric Martin, who replied with this. A dear friend of mine says, I wish you enough. The reason? What more do we need? My personal mantra that I try to live by is peace, love, kindness, understanding, and inclusion. But sometimes I just might come across as holier than thou, so I try to temper my convictions. Now notice the self-awareness and empathy built into his message. And no, Eric, never have I ever heard you sound holier than thou. And finally, there's my friend Gail Fritz, an amazing fireball of a woman full of life and love and humor and goodwill, who replied to my post with this. When I shop at a store, instead of telling the clerk, have a nice day, I always say, I hope people are good to you today. I hope people are good to you today. What a message that sends beyond the usual, have a nice day, which can even be said with such a tone as to mean the exact opposite, right? It's hard to mistake the kindness, empathy, and civility in Gail's message. And so, I hope people are good to you today.